as it is said. If somebody says to you, for example, I have a car, or I have a house, we don't go to some other meaning. We assume car means car, house means house. Now, this may be obvious in that usually people don't use the term car to mean anything else, although we use car to refer to toys, toy car. But when a person says, I have a car, we don't assume he means a toy car, not a real car. We assume he means a real car. If he says, I have a house in Connecticut, we don't think that he means, he has a doll house. As a kid, he had a doll house that he played with, and that's the house he has in Connecticut. We don't go there. We assume he says, I have a house in Connecticut, it means a real house. You assume he says, I have the car in Connecticut, it means a real car. It doesn't mean a toy. So, that is the way language is. And that's the way that the names of Allah and His attributes should be taken. So when, for example, we find a verse in which Allah says, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. Instead, His two hands are spread out, and He provides as He wishes. Some people say, well, hands, this is not appropriate. We don't want to say Allah has hands because that's making Him like His creatures, etc., etc. So hands must mean something else. It must mean here maybe His generosity, But we don't have the right to do that. Yes, Allah is generous. There's no doubt. But if He said His hands are spread out, we take it on face value. But we don't go into how His hands are. We don't go into the details. We don't try to understand it. Just as Allah says He is the ever-living. He's living. He's a living God. Now His life is not like our life. We understand life as we know it. And we believe God is living, but we don't claim to understand how He is living. Beyond what He has told us, that, for example, His life is without beginning and without end. That is clear, because He has informed us of that. But other than that, we don't go into how it is. We leave it as it is. So similarly, what we do with regards to all of Allah's names is we look at them in accordance with verse 11 of the 42nd chapter, Ash-Shura, in which Allah says there, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Nothing is similar to Him. Nothing is similar to Him. So whatever He describes Himself and however He describes Himself, we don't try to make it similar to anything in His creation, because to do so, in fact, is to then make Him like His creation. And if He is dissimilar to everything, anything that we describe will have to be from what we have seen, we have heard, we have felt, from what our senses perceive, because we cannot describe anything that we have never seen, touched, smelled, etc., or heard. How to describe a sound one has never heard? We can't. So, when we come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we accept whatever descriptions He gives of Himself without changing the meanings, deviating from the basic meanings in the language. We accept when somebody says or speaks about the hands of the clock, that these hands are not like human hands. We have accepted that already. We're able to recognize these terms in other contexts as not being the same as the obvious meaning of the term. Similarly, we talk about the face of a mountain. But we don't perceive, when we think of face of a mountain, as having eyes, nose, and a mouth, etc. No. It means the side of the mountain. So, these terms exist in the language, and we accept that when applied to different creatures, it has different meanings. We talk about our legs, but now when we talk about the legs of an ant, or the legs of an elephant, I mean, these are all quite different, but we're still using the same term, leg. So since we can accept that within the creation itself, we may use similar terms, but they have different meanings when applied to different creatures. Similarly, we should not have any problem in accepting that though a common term may be used between Allah and ourselves, what it means for us is not what it means for Allah at all. The second principle that we need to understand with regards to Allah's names and attributes is that all of Allah's names and attributes are transcendent. They're perfect. They're free from any kind of deficiency in any respect. As Allah said, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. All the most beautiful names belong to Allah. So, we only give Him those names which He has given Himself. And if, for example, we find a text which seems to indicate the name of Allah, but there is in it some deficiency, then we have to know that this is not applicable to Allah. For example, the name Ad-Dahr, which means time. There is a hadith, a statement of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said, لا تسبوا الدهر فإن الله هو الدهر. What does that really mean? Does it mean that Allah is time, time which Allah created, which has a beginning and has an end? Of course not. That's why to refer to Allah as Ad-Dahr, that this would be one of His names, is not acceptable. What evidence do we have to go elsewhere? Well, there's a statement which is that of Allah. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ quotes Allah as saying, بِيَدِيَ الْأَمْرُ أُقَلِّبُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارِ. The affair is in my hand. I flip the night and the day. So, from that it's concluded that what is meant by the statement of the Prophet ﷺ about Allah being time, meaning that He is the owner of time. It is in His control. He flips the day and the night, He changes it as He wills. So such a name is not applicable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that, dear viewers, we're going to close this segment, and we will continue to look in our coming segment at the rules governing how to understand the names of Allah. And from there we will begin to look at the names of Allah themselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
When you are weak and the road seems long, remember, just remember, seek strength from the strong.